Yes guys, and welcome back to the channel. So today we're going to be talking about the Los Angeles Clippers and their chances of making their first ever Western Conference Finals, or maybe even winning their first ever NBA championship. So we'll discuss that, but before we get into that, make sure to like the video and subscribe if you're new, because we've just hit 100 subscribers, which is a small milestone in the grand scheme of things, but you know, everyone's got to start somewhere. So I just want to say thanks to everyone who did subscribe, and if you're new, consider subscribing now and joining everyone else. So let's get back into the video. The LA Clippers, as I've said, they've never made a Western Conference Finals in their whole history of the franchise, but after signing Kawhi Leonard and trading for Paul George in the 2019 NBA offseason, Clippers fans, you know, they must have thought this is their year. This is their time to, at the very least, make their first ever Western Conference Finals. As we all saw last year in the bubble, you know, that didn't really pan out. The Clippers, they took a 3-1 lead in the second round versus the Denver Nuggets. The Lakers were waiting for them in a Western Conference Finals, so people were expecting Lakers Clippers, and then they blew a 3-1 series lead in the second round against the Nuggets, with Kawhi Leonard and especially Paul George, playoff P, pandemic P, whatever you want to call him, choking in Game 7. Now, Kawhi, he had a pretty good playoff all in all. It was just a Game 7 he choked in, but Paul George, you know, he's called playoff P for a reason, I suppose. You know, he for years he's had bad playoffs now with OKC and now with the Clippers as well. He did well in Indiana, but like the last 3 or 4 playoff runs he's been involved in, they've not gone well at all for him and the team. But this year they've assembled another deep roster with a championship winning head coach in Ty Lue, and maybe this is the year that they at least make their first ever conference finals, and as I said, maybe even win their first ever NBA championship. They're currently third in a very competitive Western Conference with a 37-18 record, only behind the second place Phoenix Suns, who are 37-15, and also behind the Utah Jazz, but they've kind of run away with the first seed. But I can still see them catching the Phoenix Suns, you know, if they really went for it, and you know, play Kawhi in most of the games from now till the end of the season. But that probably will not happen because Kawhi, you know, he likes to load manage. This season, the Clippers, they've spread their scoring out very well between all their players. Some of them, especially like Kawhi Leonard, obviously, and Paul George, do most of the heavy lifting. But people like Marcus Morris, Reggie Jackson, and Serge Ibaka are all averaging over 10 points per game. So you've got Kawhi and Paul George averaging around 20-25 points per game. Then you've got people like Reggie Jackson, Marcus Morris, and Serge Ibaka all over 10 points per game, which is very good. And they've also got players like Zubats, Luke Canard, Pat Bev, and Nick Batum, all averaging over 8 points per game. So as I said, the scoring is really spread out here. They're not completely relying on Kawhi and Paul George. Obviously, you know, in a tight game down the stretch, they're the guys that will be hitting the shots. But they got a deep roster. You know, if I can get Kawhi or PG a bit of rest, you can bring some of these guys in and they'll knock the ball down. This season, the Clippers are currently ranked number 1 in offensive rating. You know, with heading to teams like the Nets and the Jazz, that's very good. Obviously, being the best at something, you know, fair play to them. They're also the 4th best in points per game, so averaging 100. They've averaged 115 points per game, which puts them 4th in the NBA. So you know, they're scoring the ball very well, sharing it around, and you know, they're making it hard for teams. And also, they're also first in free throw percentage. So you know, if you bring them to the line, if you think, yeah, we'll just foul them and they'll miss their free throws, nope, they're the best team at them. So they'll knock down the free throws, so they can hit you from everywhere. And also 3-point shooting, they're first in 3-point shooting with 42% shooting as a team from 3. So this team's got it all. You got 3-point shooting, and you've got your free throw shooting. You know, so they can punish you from everywhere and anywhere. That's the saying anyway. So offensively, the Clippers, they got the firepower to win an NBA championship for sure. That's not in question, I don't think. Come playoff time, a few guys, their averages might drop a bit, but as of right now, I see their offensive power, and I say they can easily win a championship with that offensive power. Defensively, the Clippers, they are pretty strong as well. They're currently ranked 10th in defensive rating. And the Clippers have some great defenders, you know, to stick on LeBron James, Anthony Davis, you know, and Nikola Jokic. Actually, no, Jokic, especially after what I did last year to them, maybe not him, but they've got some very good wings, you know, like Kawhi and Paul George, that can do a great job defensively. And speaking of Kawhi, this year he's averaged 26 points per game, 6.6 boards a game, and 5 assists per game on 39.5% shooting from 3 on 5 threes a game. So he's knocking the 3 down very well. Also 1.7 steals, so he's active on the defensive end. At this stage in Kawhi's career, we all know what we're getting from him now. What is he, 29, 30? So a very consistent player from his days in San Antonio. So we all know what we're getting from him. And as we all know, he's one of the best two-way players in the league, averaging 26 points per game and 1.7 steals, which shows you the impact he's making on both ends of the court. Now Kawhi is a free agent this offseason, and there's rumours both ways. People are saying that he's most likely going to re-sign the Clippers. Other people are saying that the Warriors, Heat are interested in him. The Knicks have cap space. So I think if the Clippers, if they have another really poor playoff exit like they did last year against the Nuggets, blowing a 3-1 series lead, if they have another embarrassing playoff exit, I can see Kawhi saying, you know what, I'm out of here. If they make a Western Conference Finals, he'll stay. I'm pretty sure he'll stay. There's no shame in losing to someone like the Lakers in a Western Conference Finals, but if it's an embarrassing 3-1 comeback again, or even against a team that they're favoured in, you know, let's say the Mavericks again or something, I don't know. If it's another embarrassing playoff exit, I can see him, you know, leaving the Clippers to Paul George, which is a problem in itself. But on to Paul George, he's averaging 23 points per game on 44% shooting from 3 on 3.2 threes a game, also 1.1 steals. So PG-13, in the regular season, he's an all-star level player, as we saw this year, became an all-star once again. But when it matters most, and what it really comes down to when judging Paul George, will be how he plays in the playoffs. Because as I said, recently with the OKC and last year with the Clippers, he's been terrible in the playoffs. You know, he's been a liability in the playoffs. We all know Game 7 last year, hitting the side of the backboard. Even in OKC, couldn't get him past the first round, I think twice, 2 years in a row. So, you know, Paul George stays in some good teams, you know, it's like Kawhi Leonard, Russell Westbrook and those guys. So, he's going to need to step up. If Paul George steps up and plays like he does during the regular season, the Clippers could easily make the NBA Finals and maybe even go on and win it, who knows. So, Paul George, a lot of pressures on him, I think. A lot of, you know, the Clippers probably go as far as he goes, because you know we're going to get Kawhi Leonard. What's he going to do? Onto some very good role players that they also have on their team. They just brought in Rajon Rondo, and he's averaging career lows this season in most categories. So statistically, had a very poor season. But come playoff time, unlike Paul George, Rondo has actually earned his name of Playoff Rondo. You know, Paul George, I don't think he even deserves a playoff name. Playoff P, I think someone's too nice to him. You know, I think it's just Paul George. But that's just me. But Rondo, as a Laker fan myself, I've seen how good he is in the playoffs. Last year he was really poor once again during the regular season. Some Laker fans are saying they do not want to see him in the rotation, maybe even trade him, whatever. But when it matters most in the playoffs, even if he's not putting up 20 points every game or 10 assists, the impact he has on the court is massive. One of the most intelligent basketball players of all time, really. He knows nearly everyone's plays. He's just a great player to have in the locker room. He'll demand a lot of players like Paul George. You know, last year, you know, Montrezl Harrell and Lou Will, they were not happy, because Paul George was, you know, bossing around the dressing room a bit, him and Kawhi Leonard. But Rondo, he's a 2-time NBA champion, just like Kawhi. Or, yeah, just like Kawhi. So, you know, he's going to be demanding. And that's what Paul George might need to get the best out of it. So who knows. But Rondo, I think, will be a good pickup. Obviously, they gave up Lou Will for him. But I think with his experience, setting the table for people like Kawhi and Paul George, a great leader on the team, I think this is going to be a very good move for them. Also, Reggie Jackson this year, another point guard. He's averaging 10 points per game on 43% shooting from 3. Reggie, he's had a great season this year. He's bringing scoring, and what his role will be to try and help replace the scoring that they've lost in Lou Williams. But I think this season, Reggie Jackson, he's had a much better season than he did last year when he joined the Clippers. So I think he's been a very good player to have on the roster. Be interesting to see, will he continue as the starting point guard, or will he get that to Rondo? Have to wait and see. But either way, 2 great options to have. Luke Canard, he's had an up and down season this year. I remember a while back, he wasn't even getting game time. Like Ty Lue wasn't bringing him on, wasn't playing him. Coach's decision, and he had a very poor start to this season. But recently, last couple of weeks, 3 or 4 weeks, he stepped it up, averaging 8 points per game on 47% shooting from 3 on 3.4 threes a game. So hitting the 3 ball very well, and the Clippers will need him to definitely come off the bench, bring a bit of scoring power, get some 3-point shooting in there. He'll be crucial in a playoff run, you know, so you can give guys like Kawhi Leonard and Paul George a bit of a rest. And then they've also got some great big men on the roster. I'm talking about Zubac, who's averaging 8.7 points per game, 7.3 boards and 1 block. Very underrated center, got him for very little from the Lakers. He's been a great pickup, still not too old, still very young really. And They've also got experienced duo in Serge Ibaka, who's averaging 11 points per game, 6.7 boards, and 35% shooting from 3, and also 1.2 blocks. And Boogie Cousins, who they signed on a 10-day. They'll probably keep him for the rest of the season. Boogie this year, he's averaging 9.3 points per game and 34% shooting from 3. So you got a good mix of youth and experience between Zubac, Boogie, and Serge. You got the defense in Serge and Zubac. You've also got the offensive firepower in people like Serge and Boogie, and also Serge can hit the 3, even Boogie as well, but just not as good as Serge Ibaka. But they've got a lot of great options for the center position, and they also have a lot of great options in the power forward position in Marcus Morris and Nick Batum. So they're pretty loaded everywhere. They've also got a good young player, like the Lakers have Taylor Horton-Tucker. The Clippers have Terrence Mann. Now he's not being talked about as much as THT, but Terrence Mann, he's had a great season for him so far. I think it's only his second season in the NBA, so it's good to see young players do well. And he's in the rotation at the moment. We'll have to wait and see come playoff time will he stay in the rotation. But I think Clippers fans will be pretty happy about how he's playing as of right now. So overall, I think the Clippers, they've got a great chance of getting out of the West. Not just two. I think this year they have to aim for the Western Conference Finals. You gotta want to keep Kawhi, so you gotta make at least the Western Finals. If the Lakers aren't 100% healthy, the Clips can easily get past them. If AD is only playing at 60%, I think LeBron will be fine. But if the Lakers continue to have the injury problems that they're having, they can easily get past them. I take them over the Suns and the Jazz as of right now. Maybe we're disrespecting the Jazz and Suns here a bit, and I recognise what they've done this season. They've done very, very well, especially the Jazz, and Chris Paul has made a great impact on the Suns. But I'd still pick the Clippers over them in a 7-game series. Maybe I'll be right, maybe that's wrong. Only after that, the only other team I'll be concerned for the Clippers are the Denver Nuggets, because we all saw what they did to them last year. I think the Nuggets match up very, very well for the Clippers. I don't see someone who can stop Jokic really. They have a great roster, the Nuggets. A very deep roster as well, so they'll push the Clippers very far. But the Clippers, they got a very deep roster themselves now. And if Rondo can step up, if playoff Rondo is still here, and Paul George can just have a good playoff series, can play well in the playoffs, not even at an elite level or MVP level, just have a good playoff series, then the Clippers will get to at least a Western Finals and maybe even out of the West. And from there, who knows, maybe a first ever NBA championship. As I said, most of the season relies on PG. If he turns up in the playoffs, they've got as much of a chance as anybody. If he doesn't, and the Clippers are relying on Kawhi Leonard, a 35-year-old Rondo, and then all these good role players. These role players are great, and I've spoke about why, they bring scoring and all that, good defense, but you need your all-star players to step up. You can't just be Kawhi, you need Paul George as well. And if Paul George steps up, they got a great chance. If he doesn't, maybe they'd blow another embarrassing lead. Kawhi leaves him in the off-season, he joins Miami. The Clippers then are stuck with Paul George for the next 4 years on a max contract or near enough, and they got no picks after the Paul George trade, and it could all end terribly. But we'll have to wait and see. But anyway, guys, tell me what you think. Do you think this is the year the Clippers make their first ever Western Finals, or even get out of West? As I think they will if after the Lakers are 100% healthy, but you can't guarantee health. So you guys tell me. Anyway, guys, thanks for watching. Make sure to like the video, subscribe if you're new, and turn on notifications so stay notified when we upload. And with all that said, I'm out of here.